Hello viewers, you are watching Afghanistan Report and I'm your host Swati Kundra. The main stories are: Russia worries about concentration of Islamist terror groups in Afghanistan. Afghan Shiite Muslims mark Ashura. And Kabul University unlikely host for Women's Studies program. Russia has raised concern over a concentration of Islamist groups in northern Afghanistan near borders of Tajikistan and Turkmenistan. We have a report.
Maria Zakharova, a spokeswoman for the Russian Foreign Ministry, said they are concerned about the concentration of Islamist terror groups in northern Afghanistan.
Мы отмечаем растущее влияние в Афганистане террористической группировки ИГИЛ. К настоящему времени она обосновалась в 25 из 34 провинций страны, обеспокоенная продолжающимся процессом сосредоточения боевиков ИГИЛа в северных областях Афганистана, вблизи границ этой страны с Таджикистаном и Туркменистаном. Озабоченность российской стороны, я думаю, всем очевидна и понятна.
Russia, alarmed by increased activity by Islamist insurgents near its borders with Central Asia, may act to re-establish its control over Tajikistan's border with Afghanistan. Taliban insurgents have made advances in the Afghan province of Kunduz, bordering Tajikistan, while the prospect of Islamic State-trained militants arriving in the region from the conflict in Syria have increased security fears among Russia and its Central Asian allies.
The director of a private TV station in Afghanistan has raised concern of growing threat from the Taliban. The danger has increased since the brief capture of Kunduz by the Taliban. A report.
Already forced to operate in one of the world's most hostile environments for journalists, Afghan television stations are now being openly targeted by Islamist insurgents as they continue a widening insurgency that threatens cities across the country. Amid reports of summary executions, kidnapping and other abuse, the Taliban also issued a grim warning to two Afghan television stations, Tolo News and One TV, designating them as military objectives. Both stations had reported allegations of rape by Taliban fighters during the fighting in Kunduz, incensing the militant Islamist movement, which accused them of spearheading a US-sponsored propaganda campaign. Tolo News, Afghanistan's first 24-hour news channel, has been one of the most active reporting operations in the country for years, employing dozens of journalists, many in volatile provincial areas.
All of Kunduz, it was an important story for us. It is the fifth largest city in the country with a population of nearly 500,000. For us, it was indeed the biggest story of the past 14 years. So we decided to move in and report that how it happened and why it happened and how it affects lives of millions of people in northern Afghanistan, not necessarily in Kunduz. We dispatched our biggest team to the city. About 10 reporters were on the ground.
Parts of Afghanistan's largest private broadcaster, the station has won a reputation for fast, credible reporting in a shifting media landscape that features scores of newspapers, broadcasters and online news sites. It insists it was scrupulous in reporting all sides of the Kunduz fighting, including allowing Taliban spokesmen a right of reply.
Top security journalist from Kabul who reported non-stop from there for the past 3 weeks, starting from how it happened to why it happened and how lives are affected. We filed more than 100 TV packages from Kunduz and we profiled families. We indeed covered the story from different angles.
The Taliban said reporters and offices of both Tolo News and One TV would be considered enemy personnel and would be eliminated. The Afghan government, the main journalists association and international organizations including the United Nations condemned the threats, while media groups pledged to deny coverage to the Taliban if reporters were harmed.
This is not going to affect the way we work. This is not going to set the agenda for us as TV channels or the Afghan media.
But the threat nonetheless adds a dangerous new complication for local journalists working in a country already ranked as low as 122 out of 180 in the World Press Freedom Index, a gauge of media freedom compiled by the group Reporters Without Borders.
Moving on, American Special Operation Analysts knew they were bombing a hospital run by Doctors Without Borders in the Afghan city of Kunduz, claims a report by a foreign news agency. It says the U.S. Special Operation Analysts believe the hospital was being used by a terrorist to coordinate Taliban activity. Doctors Without Borders has called for an impartial investigation into the deadly airstrike on its hospital in Kunduz by the U.S., which killed at least 14 staff and 10 patients, with 9 others still unaccounted for. Shiite Muslims in Afghanistan mark Ashura with self-flagellation to commemorate the killing of the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad. Take a look.
On October 21, Afghan Shiite Muslims in Kabul beat themselves with steel-tipped flails during the Ashura commemorations, a festival to mourn the death of the Prophet Muhammad's grandson, Imam Hussein. Hussein was killed during the battle in 1680 AD in Karbala, now part of modern-day Iraq. Many Shiites mourn his death by trying to feel his pain.
ما با عشق ابو عبدالله حسین و حضرت ابوالفضل عباس زنجیر میزنیم و هیچ کدوم درد حس چیزی نمیکنه. اگه یک دست خود آدم قدی چاقو ببره در یک مو خوب نمیشه، اما زخم تیغدار زدن تا دیگر خوب میشه. هیچ کدوم چیزی نیست، عشق است فقط. ما به خاطر عشق زنجیر میزنیم، تیغ میزنیم.
قابل یزیدیان و کاخ یزیدیان قیام کرد و از آل اولاد خود در ایران به خاطر نگه داشتن دین حضرت محمد صلی الله علیه و سلم نگهبانی و از آل اولاد خود تیر شد.
Shiite Muslims, which make up nearly 15% of the Islamic world, mourn for a month as part of the festival. Ashura, which falls on the 10th day of the first month of the Islamic calendar, is observed in Iraq and other countries with sizable Shiite communities, including Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, Bahrain, Iran, Lebanon, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and Syria.
Kabul University has launched the country's first master's program in gender and women's studies with hopes that it will empower women in conservative Afghanistan. Let's take a look.
When a 27-year-old woman known as Farkhunda was violently beaten and killed in the heart of Kabul by a mob accusing her of burning the Quran in March this year, the world was shocked, and so were many Afghans. Farkhunda's death and recent attacks on schoolgirls by the Taliban, who claimed to have unleashed poisonous gas in their classroom, highlight the fact that there is still a long way to go. On October 19th, a course at Kabul University started with hopes that thought, insight and awareness on women from an academic point of view would help empower Afghan women and also spread awareness of women's rights, which could in the future promote equality in society as well as the workplace.
بخاطر که در شرایط افغانستان، در شرایط فعلی افغانستان پروگرام جندر یک نیاز مبرم هست. بسیاری زنها اونا حقوق نمیفهمن، اون چیزی که حق که بر از اونا داده شده از او آگاهی ندارن و ما میتونیم توسط این پروگرام او حقی که اونا دارن بر از اونا برسانیم، کمک کنیم که شما هم میتونید در جامعه کار کنین، فعالیت کنین، درس بخونین، یعنی تنها منحصر به محیط خانه نیستید.
The 18 female and 10 male students will study gender issues as well as issues related to gender violence in the program funded by South Korea and run by the UN Development Program in coordination with the government. The project is not without critics who argue the course just delves in foreign notions of gender. When the course was presented to the Ministry of Higher Education, it took 2 months to be approved. However, professors involved in the course said the studies were essential and were relevant as they would take into account the Afghan social context.
I think it's a very good point in this program. It is teaching by the Afghan colleagues, Afghan professors. And with according with our reality, according with our society, it is very important.
Nevertheless, Kabul University is somewhat unlikely host, having been the stage for heated protests against women's rights. In 2013, hundreds of students marched against the elimination of violence against women law, objecting to its secular foundations. Some residents in the city were generally supportive about the new course held by Kabul University.
طالبه زمانی که طالبان در اینجا وجود داشتند هیچ زن حق نداشت با تعلیم و تربیه یا با تحصیل یا بره. پس حال فعلا وضعیت که است باید کشور افغانستان کوشش کنه که حقوق زنان را برشان بده و تعلیم و تربیه را برشان فراهم کنه و مساعد بسازه.
Under the Taliban's interpretation of Islam, who came to power in 1996, women and girls were banned from public life, including going to school and working, and had to wear a full-body burqa when venturing outside. Millions of girls have gone back to school in the last 14 years since the fall of the Taliban, but access to higher education has been limited.
With that, we come to the end of this week's episode of Afghanistan Report. I'm Swati Kundra, taking your leave. We will be back next week with more news and views from Afghanistan. Goodbye and Khuda Hafiz.